Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about life-giving habits for a flourishing family culture. Today on the show, I'm chatting with Carrie De Francisco. She's the author of several books on homeschooling. Her newest one, A Home Education Handbook, is all about 9 questions to ask for simple and balanced home-based learning. Thanks for joining me today, Carrie.
It's good to be back, Jennifer.
I'm excited to chat with you. You've been such an encouraging voice for homeschool moms with your cooking/homeschool tips videos. I love those. They're so great. And one of your books that my friends have really enjoyed is your high school handbook. So many homeschoolers get really scared when it comes to high school, and that's when a lot of them throw in the towel. And yet the high school years are this beautiful opportunity to really visit with our kids and be a coach to them and talk about great books and big ideas together. So before we talk about your new book, I'd just love to have you share a few of your, favorite things that you did in high school.
Myself or with my kids?
Well, both. Like the things that you're
Okay.
like, this was a win. This was a good decision.
Well, I think the biggest win and the best decision was to continue homeschooling through high school. That was chef's kiss. That's the new expression these days. But I think I said this before when we were talking about high school, that I truly do feel like God saved the best for last. And when you homeschool through high school, you really get, like you were saying, that extra time to connect. You get to build relationships when they're becoming who God created them to be. And you get to enter into their world of what they love. And so if you love what they love, and I got to learn alongside them. Because if I answer your question based on what was the best thing about my personal high school experience, it was awful because I didn't learn a thing. So when we homeschooled through high school, I felt like it it really restored my own education, and it brought back my love of learning and my curiosity. And so that was the biggest win, just continuing to homeschool through the high school years.
That's so great. What were some of the favorite books that you read with your high schoolers?
Ooh, okay. So now when my son was in high school, he was one of the COVID kids, right? So, and he's more of my political kid. So he likes to talk about current events and stuff like that. So we really enjoyed reading 1984, especially during that time, right? And so that was like, he had a lot of aha moments with that one. And I absolutely loved reading. I'm from the South, but I loved reading all of Mark Twain's books, but especially The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and things like that, because we were able to talk about a lot of issues and things that were happening, pre-COVID. And so those were some of my favorites. But one of the ones he really enjoyed that he took copious notes for was How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Oh,
By
amazing.
Carnegie.
Yeah.
He loved that one. And my daughter, we just loved reading anything and everything that was fantasy, medieval, historical fictions, stuff like that.
Have you and your daughter read the Emma M. Lyon books yet? The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon?
No, and you are the third person in less than a week to tell me about those. So I'm
Yeah,
going to have to.
at this point, I've talked about them on the podcast. I've written a blog post about them just because how homeschoolers, we get really into a literature genre, like, oh, I've read all the Ellen Montgomery books, or I've read all the, Louisa May Alcott, or, me and my kids read all the Little House on the Prairie and all the Betsy Tacy books. I don't know if you and your daughter read those. So there's all these series for young women that are so delightful. This Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon are like that. And it's very rare. It feels like a jewel in the, a needle in the haystack, honestly, in modern women's fiction, because so much of it, I was getting so tired of reading women's fiction that was so like anti-man and like I can do everything myself. And it was such a breath of fresh air. So, your new book is A Home Education Handbook, and it's all about 9 questions to ask. What are like, I know you're not going to tell us all 9 questions. People need to buy the book, but I'd love to hear like, what are some of those questions that we could be asking ourselves for a simple and balanced home-based learning experience?
Well, I think to back up just a bit, it was very intentional that I named it a home education handbook and not a homeschooling handbook. And the reason that I put simple and balanced in the title was because now that I'm a retired homeschool mom and I'm really coaching and helping homeschooling moms nowadays do this home education thing, it keeps coming up how I think the word of 2026 should be balance, that they're having trouble balancing home life and homeschooling. And so I purposely picked the home education because when you do homeschooling, you're literally doing school at home and the focus is on the academics. And I'm not saying that's bad, but when you're home educating, academics is a part of that. It's not the all end all be all. Life is in there, and doing life together and homemaking and all of that stuff is in there. So in order to simplify your homeschooling and to keep it balanced, I had to stop having a to-do list or a check-off list or like lesson plans. Did we get through these things every day? Because I often felt defeated at the end of the day, because no matter how much stuff we checked off, there were always things I didn't check off, right? And so I was focusing on those things. So I had to turn my to-do list or my checklist into questions. So at the end of each day, in order for me to feel like the kids were getting a well-rounded, beautiful education, was to ask these 9 questions. And so one of them, like for instance, is, today did we worship? So at the end of the day, if I could say that sometime during the day, we together as a family sat down and worshiped the Lord in some way. And again, that could be so many things, because the mamas who are doing school at home feel like they have to have a formal Bible curriculum or a formal apologetic curriculum, which is great if they're older, maybe, right? But worshiping the Lord can take so many different forms, right? So you could pray, you could sing, you could just open up God's word and read from it. You could do a devotional. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 30 minutes, or in the case like with my son, when we were doing some Bible studies, it was like forever. But so like that's one question. And I like to bookend the first question, today did we worship, with the last question, today did we rest? So if there was some time in our day where we could all take some time to just breathe and to rest, no matter, again, what that looked like. It could take so many different forms depending on the season you're in, the age of your kids, what's going on in your life that day. But rest, if we balance rest with our work, then we're going to get a whole lot more done. And it's just, so like those are just some of the 9 questions. And that's kind of, and then what I do in each chapter is, once I pose the question, I then try to challenge the moms to look at what they did that day that answered that question in the affirmative. Score, like, oh yeah, we did this, we did that. Oh, that counts. Awesome. And then they get a more of a sense of accomplishment, and that they are learning and they are having the kind of home education experience they wanted without actually having to follow strict lesson plans.
What a wise idea, Carrie, because it is true that being too tied to, like, did I finish all these math lessons? And sometimes mom just they schedule way too much. I often have people who are using the Peaceful Press say, do I need to add more? And I'm like, no, like there's nature study built in, there's science experiments, there's history read alouds, there's timeline and geography. You don't need to just be doing school all day to feel like you are a good homeschool. And I think it is true that we've been programmed by being in school ourselves to think that it takes that long. But the problem when we overschedule ourselves is there's no time for our kids to process what they have learned. Like you have to think and wonder. And when we're constantly giving them new information and just filling every moment with a new worksheet because we feel like, oh, they can't have like blank space. God
Mhm.
forbid they be bored or have a moment to process what they've already learned. Then we really steal that depth of learning and that ability to make learning their own from our children.
Yeah, and I actually talk a lot about that in the book there, because several of the questions are, today did we move? Today did we go outside? And so today were we creative? And so when I talk about those different questions, I talk about research that um, not prove, but also talk to what you were just saying. That if they're over scheduled, if they're every minute of their day is planned out, if they're constantly doing academic formal work, they don't have this downtime. And the research out there is overwhelming that not just our kids, we need downtime. And when we have it, that's when our brain can start to process, and I like to say marinate, and chew on the things that they were learning so that they can process it and understand it. And I also talk in the book a lot about the research out there about allowing your kids to be bored, that we don't allow our kids to wallow in this boredom, because boredom will breed creativity. But we never give our kids the opportunity to just sit and wonder, like you said, or to sit and watch the clouds, to just kind of sit and kind of think, what am I going to do right now? Or to sit and think about what they were just learning and how they can apply that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very important we give our kids this downtime.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing that comes when we have downtime, because some of you listening might be thinking, well, I let my kids have time to just be, but some of that time to just be should include us. You know,
Mhm.
when we are always working, you know, running around the house, putting away laundry, and we, you know, have headphones on and listen to podcasts all the time, like, listen to this one. But, you know, when we're constantly busy like that, the problem is our kids might have secrets that they need to get off their chest. They might have big things, like something might have happened to them at a co-op or a family reunion, or they might be processing something big. And if we don't slow down and have some just quiet time where we're available, where it looks like we're wide open, they're not going to feel safe to talk to us. And that's one of my biggest regrets from my earlier years of homeschooling. We had so many beautiful times together. We would sit in the middle of a creek and read out loud while the kids splashed. And it's like one of my most vivid homeschooling memories. We'd have little picnics. Like we had a really magical homeschool experience. I applied so much of what I'd learned in the Charlotte Mason Companion by Karen Andriola. But I do realize that often when I was done homeschooling for the days, I would send the kids off to play and then I would, you know, clean up the kitchen or I would get on the phone and talk to a friend. There wasn't nearly enough of that just me sitting there being available to talk. And I think it's even worse now. Like I feel so sorry for moms trying to balance screen time with being present to their kids because it's a window. It's like a flash. You know, I have 7 kids. I've been parenting for 32 years and it's a flash. And if we don't seize that time, like they say, even the years between 0 to 3 are some of the most
Mhm.
formative for our children's like emotional attunement and development. So we really have to, you know, seize the day. And I'll actually link in the show notes. There's a phone lock box that I found, and you can still see phone calls coming in and even push accept if you want to, or snooze an alarm if you need to, shut off an alarm if you need to. But sometimes when we don't have enough self-control on our own, we need to model self-control by having external boundaries like that.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up the lockbox, because one of the things I've been trying to do the beginning of this year, 2026, is to go phone free for the day. So instead of like when I'm running errands, I used to bring my phone with me everywhere, right? And so, but now I purposely leave it at home so that I could go to the grocery and whatever, or when I'm driving or going to a restaurant to meet one of the kids for dinner, whatever, I leave the phone at home, right? And so it's been really cool, but it's also been very eye-opening how many times I reach for my phone to type in like a note to myself or to see what podcasts I can listen to, and I realize, oh, wait, I didn't bring my phone. And so I'm just going to listen to good music while I'm driving or something like that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the other questions, being present with our kids is, and I don't think moms think about this as a win for the end of the day, like as a way to evaluate your day. And if you could say yes to this is a good day. But one of the questions is, today, do we care for our home and for each other? And I feel like that's what you're talking about, that if we take the time each day to actually spend time one on one, eye contact at level with our kids, teens, adult children, whatever it is, that's a win. That's a beautiful home education day. And I just feel like, and also, like, we do have, we're talking about this balance, right? So we do have to do the laundry, and we do have to do the cooking and all that kind of stuff, but bring the kids along with you. So instead, and I know when they're younger, sometimes it makes a bigger mess when they're helping you with some of that stuff. But I mean, some of my most precious memories with my mom were in the kitchen. And that was when I opened up the most to her. While she was breading, the pork chops, or she was mashing the potatoes and I was helping her peel, was I had her one-on-one attention. And those were the moments I opened up and talked about those things that you were saying, something that, happened at school or whatever. And I found with my own kids, when they're just hanging out with me, doing life things, and it could just be chores or whatever, that's when the best conversations come up. And that's, like you said, the times that they really open up and share things that are going on and questions they might have about, life or people or relationships or God. They always ask those questions at midnight.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's such a good reminder because, that's one of the reasons why we include so many projects in the Peaceful Press
Mm-hmm.
is that those like working together on something moments are moments where you're sort of open for conversation because you're not distracted by something else. You guys are working together, whether it's kneading a loaf of bread or peeling potatoes for roasted potatoes or, doing a nature weaving, all those kinds of things. You're working with your hands, so your hands are busy. And then often questions come up. And even just the shared experiences, that bonding experience. I just read an interesting Free Press article that I'm all about right now about how learning keeps declining, and partly it's related to even in classrooms they're putting kids on tech. Like that breaks my heart that even in a classroom, so it's already bad enough that so many homeschoolers are using online learning for most of their homeschooling. Like that is so isolating. But then to do it in classrooms where you're with people, but then you're not really with people, oh, just heartbreaking that like the nervous system stress that is and just the lack of experiences. There's such a big difference between, reading a book while you're eating a bowl of apples and the sun streaming in, you're watercolor painting a picture and thinking about what's being read to sitting there clicking keyboard cursors on a keyboard while you watch prompts go by. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
totally different education. And especially in the early years, like I understand, especially towards high school, supplementing with, maybe online math for something that you don't understand, or having some extra help if you're homeschooling multiple ages and kids are aging out of the sort of group learning. But to make that the core of your homeschooling is just, it it does break my heart a little bit for those kids and for the moms too, because you're missing out on relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The learning, the education itself is not that hard. Would you agree, Carrie? Like my oldest daughter, she has a Juris Doctorate. She's studying for the bar. We did mostly just reading out loud and talking about books, and she did some math and grammar, and we did some science experiments, but it wasn't like this rigorous daily hours education. I mean, we had 7 children, we were moving, we were missionaries, we were going to the beach, you know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
it does break my heart, these, when families, out of a lack of confidence, stick their kids on a computer and call that homeschooling.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it um, is that we overcomplicate homeschooling, and it really doesn't need to be overcomplicated. So, like you said, it can be so. Now, granted, you and I know this, that homeschooling can be challenging, just because you're juggling so many things, right? That part of it can be challenging or hard, but the actual imparting of knowledge and the actual teaching of them is can just be so natural and so fun, and it's us that overcomplicate it, and it could be for various reasons. Many of us are not second generational homeschoolers, so we teach the way we were taught, and so we only know the school system, so that's how we start off.
Yeah.
And then once they get into high school, we tend to start self-doubting again. It's like, oh well, now we really have to buckle down. So and then they revert back to how we were taught. So they go back to the traditional setting. But we're the ones that overcomplicate it. And I think some of the best advice I ever got from one of my mentor moms was that I needed to get out of my kids' way. And once I got out of their way, that's when the learning really took off. That's when they truly started to become curious again and to wonder and to want to learn about all these different things that, in all honesty, I wouldn't have included in our home education because I either wasn't interested in it myself or I didn't think it was important enough, but they were important things to them. That, in all honesty, a lot of the stuff that they wanted to learn that we included because of that are now things they're using for either their professions or their hobbies or their ministries or the things that they enjoy doing. So, yeah, my daughter and I were actually reading the book. We're a little late to the game, The Anxious Generation by
Oh,
Wright.
great. Yeah, we're reading that in the Restoration Home community this year.
Yeah, and so one of the things, like you were talking about with being on computers all the time, is they talk about in the book that, obviously kids and teens need to be in personal relationship in person. And that is how they learn conflict resolution. That's how they learn communication because you can see in real time how someone is responding. And then you learn how to respond back based on the reactions you get. And so these little nuances that little kids aren't getting anymore because as soon as we sit down at a restaurant, an iPad is handed to them. And so they're not taught how to just be and converse in a conversation. And then when they're older, they're texting. And there's so many ways you can misunderstand a text, right? But it's
Yeah.
because you don't have this real life ongoing interaction. And so he's talking about also in the book how, yeah, when you do some of these online classes, like you said, sometimes you need to maybe do those kind of things because math's not your thing or it's higher than what you feel comfortable teaching. They stress in the book, at least make it not asynchronous, right? Where it's live. So at least there's this live discussion with other kids and the teacher, and it's not just something that they go through on their own, independently, at their own pace, where they're not interacting with people.
Hmm.
But yeah, that book is very eye-opening and full of some great information that talks about the things you were saying.
Yeah, I'm excited about our book club this year. We're reading it later in the year, but
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been so transformative for so many women in my community. And I'm so glad we're having this discussion. We did supplement some, there was some online college classes my kids were taking,
Mm-hmm.
or we did we did teaching textbooks, like teaching 5 or 6 kids different math levels was really intense. But one of the things that I did later on, after I kind of figured some of this out, is that I would just combine grade levels instead of balancing, having each child in a different grade level in math and trying to teach
Mm-hmm.
all those different workbooks or textbooks or math lessons. I would combine grade levels. Like the fourth and sixth graders could both do a fifth grade math. And so much of it was review, or they'd be, getting deeper with the concept. So maybe even just slowing things down a little if you need to, so you can teach deeper, because those foundations, if they decide to go into a math career. I've talked to so many moms whose children did go into engineering or some kind of a math career, and their kids, some of them didn't have a lot of interest or didn't have even necessarily a lot of aptitude in the elementary years, but they were diligent. They taught them their math facts, and then by high school they had the inspiration. One of them, her son is an engineer, and he didn't it wasn't even until later high school. They'd just done a lot of like Legos and,
Mm-hmm.
building projects. So I think sometimes moms are scared their kids will be behind, but a little deeper learning that's better is, superior to just kind of surfacey, shallow, getting everybody on a computer program or doing, a quick lesson with everybody. Trying to combine, I think, can help you get a little deeper. What are some of, you think these are the best tips moms really need to hear this before they start this new homeschool month?
Ooh, that's a really good question. First of all, I think I'm going to go back to what one of my mentors told me about: get out of your kids' way.
Hmm.
Actually sit down with them and have a conversation and be like, I know what I want to learn. What do you want to learn? And actually get their input as to, if they're a little bit older, what do you want to learn about? What kind of things are you interested in? And tailor their education to that, or incorporate that as much as you can. And I know I sound like a broken record, but as much as you can learn together as a family, like you were saying. And yes, again, there are times where you might want to put your kid in an outside class or an online class, but that should be like the exception, or the, like, ooh, you're going to get to do this robotics class. But everything else, it's you and your family and your kids, and you're learning together. And I feel like the less you overschedule, the better it's going to be. You're not going to get burned out, and your kids aren't going to get burned out
Yeah.
if you
the-
keep, like you said, if you dig deep instead of trying to do, a whole bunch of stuff. And, like you were saying with the math, just another example, when my son was in high school, he had no interest in biology, anatomy, sciences. He didn't plan on going into any kind of, science field whatsoever. So that wasn't part of his 4-year plan. We did the bare minimum for California graduation, to get a diploma, but that wasn't his focus. So we didn't really do an awful lot of that. What I did do was we dug deep in how to learn and how to study, how to teach yourself new skills, how to problem solve. Those were the things I really focused on, because I wasn't quite sure where he was going to go once he graduated. And then now he's an EMT and he's studying to be a paramedic. And all that biology and anatomy and chemistry is super important. Is he behind because we didn't do it in high school? No, because the kid knows how to learn. And he's also dyslexic, so he knows the techniques and the study habits that really help him learn different things. So he's thriving and he's doing just fine. But we didn't focus on that stuff when he was in high school. But he's using it and learning it now as an adult in his career.
Yeah. There's so much freedom in that. One of my favorite podcasts that I listened to last year was by the founders of the Perfect Bar. It's that little refrigerated peanut butter bar. And they were basically unschooled. Their dad was like this kind of crazy, idealistic entrepreneur, and they were homeless for a season. I mean, had a very hard life, and weren't in school at all, and yet they grew up and founded this amazing business. And I think I can't remember if they sold it for millions or if they're still running it, but there's so many stories like that. And I'm not saying to be a slacker and unschool your kids and be homeless. I'm just saying don't be so worried, because worry is one of the worst things you can do for your homeschool. It steals the joy, it kills the enthusiasm and curiosity and the wonder of homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we close, I'd like to ask my guests one question. What habit is really transforming your life right now?
One habit that is transforming my life right now.
And maybe that's too big of a word. Maybe one
Mm-hmm.
habit that's helping you flourish.
Okay, I know this is going to sound crazy, but cooking with music. Okay, because it brings me joy. And there's just so much going on in my life and in my kids' lives and my husband's life, and the business, and writing a book, how that could be. And um, making time each day to be in the kitchen, to be creative, and to serve, and to use my love language in that way brings me much joy. And I
Mm,
find that I'm less stressed. I'm more joyful, I'm more peaceful, there's more balance in my day because I'm actually taking time now to do something I thoroughly enjoy. But also it just so happens it's a great way for me to show my love and to serve others as well. So I know cooking for some people might be like listening to fingernails on a chalkboard. So I'm not saying to everyone go cook, you'll feel better. But what I am saying is don't wait until your kids graduate. Don't wait until your kids are in high school when you're going to have more time. Start developing and spending time now, no matter what season you're in motherhood, doing at least one thing that truly brings you joy, and you will be a better person for it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And that's part of the joy of homeschooling is that we can learn with our kids. We can choose a subject. Like if you're thinking about homeschooling, you're not sure what to do, choose something that will light you up and bring joy to you. Carrie's book is A Home Education Handbook. 9 questions to ask for simple and balanced home-based learning by Carrie De Francisco. You can find it on Amazon, and we'll link it in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your wisdom today, Carrie.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's always fun talking with you.